to thank everybody's patience with me on this. And just to sort of go through a quick review here, from biblical times to the present, the concept of marriage has changed significantly in the fact that we've migrated from polygamy.
Yeah, it's a little blurry. Oh yeah, totally. But it is a little.
Is that a little better?
No, I think you need to move it a little bit.
Well,
Where's the blurry thing?
We can read it.
Oh yeah, we
Yeah.
can.
If you can't get it without.
It's easier to read without. No.
You
got it.
Better or about the same? Better. That's way better.
anyway, essentially from biblical times to today, the concept of marriage has changed significantly. We've evolved from polygamy, monogamy, from the wife is being treated as property to today, for the most part, wives are treated as equals, as Gordon kind of alluded to in his sermon this morning. And
Thank you.
from
I've never had so many compliments in my life. And I mean it. I'm not used to it.
distinguish between marriage and cohabitation to
I
today,
guess
where
I'm
there is
married
more or less a distinct line.
marriage.
And then from
Ha ha.
the
Laugh out
concubines
loud.
of the Old Testament period to today, in some states where you have common law wives, and in others it's essentially cohabitation. And marriage has been state sanctioned since the Old Testament times. The only exceptions have been during the Dark and Middle Ages at the height of the Roman Catholic Church. And essentially that changed it during the Puritan period in England. But marriage itself was codified in England in 1753. And that's kind of important because it became essentially a part of English common law. And that's where most of the states, especially the original 13 states, derive their laws. In fact, if you look at the North Carolina Constitution, you will see that what is not codified in that Constitution is covered by English common law. And another interesting thing is cohabitation statistics for the United States were not collected before 1960. In fact, marriage statistics up until relatively recently at all anywhere in the world were not collected because there were no records. Or what records there were either destroyed by fire, war, natural disaster, whatever, or just by the aging process. And especially here in the South, a lot of the courthouses were burnt down during the Civil War. So a lot of marriage records were destroyed. And then the United States Census introduced the persons of opposite sex sharing living quarters, or possession. That occurred during the 60s. And then, of course, in the United States, and this goes back to when the Constitution was ratified, now we have 50 definitions of marriage. Each state has their own definition of marriage. Some states have common law marriage, others do not. Some states, they're kind of go back to the Old Testament prohibitions on who can marry, as far as cousins, that sort of thing. In North Carolina, I don't believe they make that distinction, at least in the case of first cousins. A first cousin can marry in North Carolina. In Old Testament times, a first cousin did not marry.
I I assume all those up until recently have been a man and a woman have been stated. Isn't that definition of marriage?
So that's essentially the definition of marriage.
Up until recently.
Well, in certain states now, there are single-sex marriages that are
Mark,
recognized.
Mark, I do taxes with H&R Block, and previously to this year, you could be designated as Mr. and Mrs., Mr. or Ms. This year, we have Mr., Ms., and taxpayer 1 and taxpayer 2. Because it could now be Mr. and Mrs., Mr. and Mr., Ms. and Ms. So now we are taxpayer 1 and taxpayer 2.
And this is, in determining head of household and that sort of thing.
That is.
So that's something
Does that mean
we
a
should.
same-sex marriage has to determine which one is head of household?
No, they have
Just
to
what?
determine whether they're taxpayer 1 or taxpayer 2.
Oh,
And once you are listed as 1 or 2 in coming years, in order to stay straight with the federal government, you have to stay with that category. You have to
Interesting.
do.
Thank you.
Wow.
But no
we
designation
usually have.
Yeah, that's-
Taxes, yes.
Correct.
But it's generic.
And whether it's Mr. or Mrs. or Mr. or Mr. or Mrs. and Mrs.
For the purposes of the exercise today, I don't want to get on the subject of same-sex marriage. That is a topic for a whole different series of classes.
We've already
Debbie,
done that.
Debbie did that one anyway.
Oh, yeah, okay. So I don't want to touch that.
No.
Yeah.
I hate talking about taxes.
In getting into the statistics now. In 1970, there were approximately 523,000 households with 2 unrelated adults of opposite sex. In 1980, that number grew to almost 1.6 million. And then in 1990, it grew to 2.9 million. And then in 1998, it went up to 4.2 million. So you see a trend here. You see the trend here.
right?
Of course, this is in the United States. I'm concentrating on the
Of course,
United
the
States.
general population grew as well, so it'd be interesting to know
That's
what
true.
percentage, how the percentages change.
Yeah.
But,
Good, I hadn't thought about
but that's very interesting.
Well, I can tell you, the population did double, almost double between 90 and 98. I mean, it probably was.
That's true.
Yeah. But still,
Well, even 2 married people are not, they're 2 unrelated adults. I don't know, that may not be what they meant,
but cohabit, if we
Oh,
back
okay.
at the beginning.
Marriage makes you related.
but marriage makes you related, okay?
Right.
There you go.
Well, in that 1990 figure,
Exactly.
I'm one of those 2.9 million in 1990 in graduate school, living in a house with 2 girls.
Yes.
Right,
You're right.
yeah.
It depends
Except
on
for bedrooms, but
Exactly,
like I said back at the beginning of this series, there are 2 types of cohabitation, conjugal and non-conjugal. That would
Right.
fall under the non-conjugal. And
But this statistic doesn't differentiate.
it does not distinguish. No.
So the higher percentage of Americans attending college probably actually
right.
makes
Yeah.
that statistic higher.
I bet
But there
for
are
sure.
some other interesting things as well I found out about this.
You're good,
You're
you're
good,
fine,
okay.
it's only 9:25.
Yeah.
It's 9:30. And this
Yeah.
is an interesting chart here. This is the percentage of women 25 to 44 years old who have ever cohabitated by education and year. It seemed like in 1980, you see the trends here between 1988 and 2006 and 2008. Across all education levels, the number increased, the number of cohabitated women who cohabitated increased. However, what struck me was those with the least education, in other words, high school or less, were more likely to cohabitate than those who were moderately educated, who had school and some college versus highly educated, those with college or graduate degrees. It seemed like, which struck me as rather interesting, because you sort of equate the education levels with also an income level. One
But
thing that
it means you have options if you have income.
exactly, and something else also, and I found this out when Tina and I went down to the New Hanover County courthouse to get our marriage license. In New Hanover County, a marriage license costs $90.
It went up. I know.
To a low-income couple, that's significant.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm not sure what the purpose behind that is. Please raise
Taxation.
Taxation, right.
But does it? But to me, I mean, if you're wanting to encourage marriage, and I'm assuming that's
Who says the government wants to encourage it?
They also want people to think seriously about it, and so it's a serious dollar amount.
Yeah.
Are you committed?
exactly.
Okay.
However,
I don't buy that.
I don't buy that. I'm sorry.
I was trying to buy it.
Because when they told me how much, I had to start scratching my head. Tina, you know, we could go out and have a real nice evening out.
We'll pretend we're married, it was $10.
Y'all just
Fine.
jumped
In
at my
1957, it was at 57 and a half. Pitt County, it was $10. And that was pretty much across the state.
I bet that was pretty expensive.
I was gonna say that.
It was not, I guess there was some people, yeah, I don't
It
know.
was a time of great affluence.
That was about 3 days' work, though.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Well, you
They
take
would make $4 a day.
3 days work, $90.
Same thing.
But I'm gonna go back to what Randy said, because I agree wholeheartedly with Randy about a educated female, a highly educated college, which supposed to be, a highly educated female has options that Randy talked about, where they're not dependent on a spouse or a male.
That is
to
correct.
Have housing included. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're uneducated, you find yourself more likely to be in that situation where you are dependent on somebody.
Exactly. And that kind of goes back to, this is going to be showing up in a couple of slides from now, is because there are income considerations when it comes to cohabitation. Now, on this particular slide, this is an this is one that I thought was very interesting. The percent chance of divorce or separation with 10 years of first marriage, and this for women 15 to 44 years old by education and year of marriage. To go back to the previous slide, of course, we had cohabitation was most prevalent among the lower income, lower educated people or women. Moderately educated, it was about 50-50, almost 50-50. And of course, the least amount of divorce within 10 years was amongst the highly educated. Which, again, I'm not sure how this correlates, to income, but also...
Sure it does.
On what?
It costs money to get an education.
It costs money to get an education, it costs money to get divorced too.
But what I'm saying is, I
Tell me, I can tell you that. It costs money to get
It
divorced.
does, sure it does. I hope I don't have to deal with that, but.
But I'm pretty nobody does, because it was not fun for me either time.
Yeah, I understand that, on that point, that Divorce is one of the most financially devastating things that an individual faces in life.
And it doesn't have to be the man every time. It can be the woman that gets stuck with the bills and
Right.
gone.
And the
Very
kids,
true.
and the
Mary
kids.
gets stuck with the whole.
That's
Yeah.
true. It's very illustrative like that.
But I thought this was rather interesting and rather graphic here.
Maybe you should have cohabitated longer before you got married. Hey, Larry, you sure are quiet over there. Sorry, Mark.
Go right ahead. Okay, now, follow up.
Over there.
This is an interesting graph as well. The percentage of 25 to 44-year-olds agreeing that marriage has not worked out for most people they know by education. This is kind of, you can put this slide on top of the previous two, and you'll see the exact same trend. The people who seem to have the least success with marriage are the ones with, if it's education or income. I think that has a lot to do with that. And because if you see the education, as the education level goes up, the percentage goes down.
Actually, you learn in school, I mean, I know the more I went to college, the more I had to do communications and psychology and sociology and learn to reason with problems rather than just fight about them.
Exactly.
And your communication skills hopefully are enhanced and you learn how to, resolve conflicts without saying,
That was in
heck
the
with you, I'm done.
service corner.
Yeah,
That's easy to do.
Yeah.
But to really work out a problem and have enough education, and that happens to be on both sides.
I agree. I
To be
agree.
able to communicate well enough and resolve conflict.
Because I have to say one other thing also, and this goes back to what I mentioned earlier, is in the income levels as well. Because let's face facts, and a hard fact, for those with the least education, they're probably going to have the least income, they're going to have the least, shall we say, either party is going to have the least to lose, if they split up.
And one of the major factors in divorce is financial.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Stress, monetary stress.
I have an example.
Yes, ma'am, please.
Somebody that used to work for my husband said, Dorothy, I'm gonna ask you something. Will you please pray for me? He says, I'm living with a woman that I love, but we can't get married. So why? He says, because I can't afford to keep both of us up. And she would lose what money she has coming in. The government would take our money. So what are we going to do?
Let me ask you a question.
I was just
Was
gonna
this
say,
a senior couple, or was this?
Yes.
Oh, hang on, we're gonna get to this. We're getting to that, Dorothy. Thank you so much for bringing that up.
Yeah, that's
Are
good.
you getting to how many of these groups are churched?
Exactly.
I could not find statistics on that. And then, truth be known, I don't know that it matters.
Yes,
I'm
it does.
church,
Well,
I've been divorced twice.
No, but, okay, I gotta make a comment. I also believe that marriage will be successful if both spouses have been raised like with the same type of culture.
Yes.
I was raised in the church, Mark was, we're from different states, but we also grew up in the country and on a farm. So we have the same type of values. We don't lie, we don't cheat.
Okay,
And I think that makes a difference because my other husband, we were very culturally different.
Okay, I didn't finish my program. This guy says, I went to church with my first wife. She was real active, I was active. And then something happened and she had an affair with somebody.
wanted you to pray
He needs
for
to
him.
get over that.
Well, that's what he asked me to do, to pray for
Yeah,
him.
pray for him.
But as Christians, we're obligated.
Yeah.
And he would love to
He
help.
couldn't go back to church, but he still believed because he wanted you to pray for him.
Yeah, oh yeah. And I'm standing there like, help, dear Lord, help. I don't know what to tell him. Help, I pray, I will pray, and I have, but I still don't know what really to pray. What do you do? Well, I guess maybe in their 60s, I guess. I don't really know how long they've been together, but anyway, I was hoping this program would tell me something, help me, how to help them. I don't know.
Now, a lot of people have looked upon cohabitation as a prelude to marriage. Some statistics I found about that, 60 to 75% of first marriages today are preceded by cohabitation.
Well, now that's changed over the last 30 years, 40 years.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. And 80 to 85% of remarriages are preceded by cohabitation. And one thing also, this has also resulted in a delay of marriage for both males and females, and from females to the age of 25 and from males to the age of 27. My first marriage, I got married at 22. She was 19. So,
At this point, I think a lot of church people don't at least acknowledge the challenge that young people face. That they're delaying marriage for education or other reasons,
Right.
and what that means in terms of sacrifice. I know my mother would often make comments to me as I'm going through graduate school and getting older about if I was saying I was going out on a date or something. She'd make some, Bible-based comment about being chaste, and she got married at age 17.
Yeah.
And so I never felt like she gave credence to that point. And I brought it up with her one day, and she said, you make a really good point there, because I remember what I was like at 17, and I'll tell you, I don't know if I could have waited until I was 18.
Yeah, that's right.
So she, after 20 years of saying that, woke up to what the challenge would be.
And reading biographies of most of our founding fathers, they didn't wait till they got married either. And even after marriage, sorry.
But yeah, you're
Jefferson.
right.
That everybody thinks we're so godly.
Exactly, that's true.
Thomas Jefferson
He
is
was
a prime
pretty-
example
pretty-
of
he
that.
got around. Yeah, and the history teacher said it, what did he say? If you read all these signs that George Washington slept here in this town, he said they're true.
They didn't say if he was alone or not.
Just slept there. That's right. Yeah. Well, I mean, that is a strong point, though.
Dorothy,
What?
can you read that?
I can.
What about the U.S. Census Bureau has reported that from 1990 to 1999, the percentage of unmarried senior couples 65 and older rose significantly. Forbes reports in 2006, 1.8 million Americans aged 50 and above lived in heterosexual, unmarried
Partner households.
households. Different percentage from juvenile. He figures Bowling Green State University.
I got one funny thing to tell you.
Please do.
There's a guy who works for company that I do, I know who that is, down in South Carolina. He's been with the company now 40, I want to say almost, I think it's 47, 48 years. Because when he got divorced, the agreement stated that when he retired, his wife got half of his 401k. So he refuses to retire. Comes in, he's almost 70.
Oh my God.
He said, well, maybe over
He's
65.
kind of selfish, then.
Maybe him.
Oh,
He says, I'm going to die at work.
Oh, goodness.
Well, that was my next question. What was
And he's
happening,
married.
what was happening in those years with the government as far as getting money to draw people?
First wife, the reason was that.
What happened then, that probably makes a difference, because that's what the concern is now.
Does your social security payment go down if you're married?
That's the catch, see, we don't know what was
I'm
happening.
not
then. The
sure.
government,
If the-
They found a way of getting some more money out of people, so therefore.
But here are the reasons that seniors cohabitate. Tax disincentives, the loss of military and pension benefits, fear of incurring liability for the partner's medical expenses.
And having to be a nurse.
Yeah, well, I don't know that. If the couples are cohabitating,
A lot of older women that either got to have a husband or they like me. If one want to marry me, there's something wrong with him. No kidding. At this age, he either wants a roof over his head, he wants me to supply being a nurse and cook and dishwashing and laundry. And forget it. I don't plan to do any of